So we're hoping for a very engaging and lively discussion and debate as we explore this very important, this very critical issue of severance. And the idea is for us to consider what we can do as a union institution to help to protect and ensure the availability of workers' severance in the event that a company is insolvent and has to close down. So we were asked, a panel of us in the union, we were asked by our General Secretary to really explore this issue in as much detail as we can. And I'll tell you a bit about the team of officers who did some research into this Severance Protection Fund. But instead of me telling you about them, I'll introduce our panel of officers who really put some research and some work, of course, with some other experts across Antigua and Barbuda into this subject matter. So what I'll do, I'll call Brother Harry Josiah, our industrial relations consultant, and he will tell us a bit more about the context and the origins of this research into this Severance Protection Fund, and of course, tell us a bit more about the panel of officers who did this research. Let's welcome Brother Harry Josiah as he comes.
Thank you very much, my brother, and good afternoon to everybody. Some months ago, a fella declared on here this morning that he's somewhat crazy when he is ready. Some months ago, he summoned me to his office and he gave me a document, and he said, I wanted you to go write a policy position for the Antigua Workers Union on mandatory severance deduction. Those were his words, mandatory severance deduction, which I didn't quite understand, but into the discussion, I realized what it is that the Honorable Gentleman Chester Hughes wanted. He wanted a policy position as to how could be established a fund by which monies could be deposited that would belong to workers if it is found that through what is written in the Labor Code, you are severed or made redundant from your position. It was a Herculean task for little me, and so with his instructions and his say-so, I put together a group of people in the Antigua Workers Union to assist with this exercise. And I will name the persons in order of their importance and priority on the committee. Brother Edgel, who just introduced me, most important. Baldwin Spencer, next most important. Sister Hazel Lou, next most important. And Hugh Joseph, next most important. And of course, the chairman, to me, was the most important. And so we took this as a very serious exercise because we realized that trade unionists, the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code makes provision as to how you can become redundant and what is to be paid to you, at least in the minimum standards in the Labor Code. But we have had several occasions where businesses would have gone out of, or establishments would have gone out of business, and people are left high and dry without severance pay. And Benji's and the Benji's group of companies is one of the companies that would immediately come to mind, because I had a brother who worked for them for 35 years, and when the company closed, there was no money to pay severance. And of course, I'm sure that everybody in here sitting down can also point to some instance where they would have had a friend or brother or relative who would have worked for a company for many years, and then it closes doors and you have nothing to show. And so it's a very important exercise that we took on. And so I would want, first of all, to thank all of the names that have called for the input, because it was a hard struggle, because it was a difficult subject. We had to find legislation that we could lean on. We got out of Trinidad, we got out of Barbados, and none of the two fit the bill that we were asked to put together. And eventually, we came upon one out of St. Kitts, where St. Kitts and Nevis, they have a piece of legislation in place, and this has been in place, my understanding is, since 1985, from which they have been making regular contribution to a fund referred to as the Severance Fund. And so what I would like to do at this point in time is to invite a former executive member, former vice president, and former assistant general secretary of the Antigua Workers Union, who the Antigua Workers Union helped to elevate him into the position of prime minister of this country. And so I would like to invite him at this point in time to read into the document that this committee prepared for our information, edification, and discussion, along with the people who are going to be sitting on the panel this afternoon. So please, let me ask you for a round of applause to thank my members of the committee. You really worked hard. When you see Chester Hughes, don't ask him how hard the committee worked. If you promise me that? No. You promise me not? No. Well, that's coming from the General Secretary, not from the delegates. So, please let's welcome Brother Spencer as he gives the report.
Thank you, Brother Josiah. May I just say that Brother Josiah would have been much more capable of making this presentation, but he wanted to create a situation where your humble servant would be brought into the picture and to let you feel that I am the mover and shaker of whatever is going to be said to you. What is going to be said to you. Let me welcome the panel who will be really dealing with this subject matter in a more direct way. But what I would like really to do is to just reinforce what Brother Josiah would have stated in terms of our moving the process on this very important labor relations and worker/employee protection that we have been looking at for a number of years, and recognizing that there is, shall I describe it as, deficiency in terms of the legislative and other underpinnings when it comes to this very important issue of severance/redundancy payments, and the fact that it has created a real concern in Antigua and Barbuda over the years, and we're fully aware of the situations that exist, and we have some of them that currently exist, where severance payments, although it's an entitlement under the law, as a matter of course or principle, but in terms of actual implementation in its entirety, that has been an issue. So we have been looking at this, and basically what we are saying is that there ought to be the establishment of what we are terming a severance protection fund. And going further, we should perhaps look at whether or not we are dealing with it within the context of setting up of a trust of some kind. But we'll get to that point. And quite frankly, I mean, we've had a labor code which has been in existence for quite some time. Although it's an outstanding piece of legislation with some 10 divisions, considers a wide range of labor matters, including basic employment, trade unions, collective bargaining, occupational health and safety, and so on, and has served as a model throughout the region in thinking about the labor code. The fact of the matter is that there have been a number of amendments that have been essential to its continued relevance relative to the dynamics of the employer-employee relationship and, of course, the work environment. Having looked at the situation, however, we recognize that on this very important question of severance entitlements and its enforceability, that there have been issues. And this is one of the areas of the code which did not receive much of an attention under the Division C Part 4 of the said code. And we felt that the time has come, and in light of what has happened or has been happening, certainly in a number of years in recent past, that we needed to address it. Of course, at the point at which severance pay becomes due and payable, it creates for employees a cushion to manage their expenses, whatever these may be, as you seek to get new employment. Simply put, it aids in relieving the immediate financial burdens which accompany sudden unemployment. What is being proposed, therefore, is a severance protection fund which serves two purposes. One, to ensure that employees' well-being is being taken care of, but at the same time, it also helps the employers in the sense that they would be seen to be making a direct contribution and committing themselves to ensure that the well-being of the employees are looked after. And so, having looked at the situation and examined what we ought to do, it was felt that there has to be specific arrangements put in place to create this protection fund as far as severance is concerned, and also to ensure that whatever is required to give it legal underpinnings, that is being done. And we even go as far as to suggest how soon we think that such a legislation should have or should be implemented. Of course, these are things that can be discussed and we come to a final agreement on. The creation of a severance protection fund is a responsible and ethical option. It is the only one that ensures the employees made redundant are not left in dire financial straits. Moreover, it benefits employers by safeguarding their reputation, reducing, if not eliminating, the chances of legal proceedings, and simultaneously fostering a loyal and motivated workforce. And so it's been proposed that we have legislation, and we determine it as it stands right now. There might be changes to the title, but the short title would be the Severance Protection Fund. We are even going as far as to propose an effective date of implementation, which would be sometime around May of 2024, after we would have gone through all the ramifications and so on and so on. So that is being proposed. Definitions and interpretation of the law. In this act you have to define what employee is, what employer is, what the fund means, what is normal wages, and so on. The probationary period, seasonal employment, trade dispute, wages, salary, disbursement. So we seek to address all these areas in this presentation, and we also address the question of the general body and a proposed board of trustees, and it speaks to the general body of the Severance Pay Fund shall be comprised of equal representation, and you have to take note of some of these things. You get an opportunity from the following bodies: employees' representatives, employers' representatives, and the Office of the Labor Commissioner. Each organization shall have a nominated individual and an alternate. The Board of Trustees refers to the decision-making members selected from among the general body as defined above or within this Act. The Board of Trustees shall comprise a chairman, deputy chairman, secretary, 4 other members. The chair of the board shall be the Labor Commissioner. The deputy chair of the Board of Trustees shall be a trade union representative. The Board of Trustees shall comprise 2/3 members, totaling 7, with a 4-member quorum eligible to conduct meetings in the absence of all members. Any member of the board who is unable to carry out their function or his or her function as a trustee shall be arrangement shall be put in place for the immediate replacement of that member from the general body. Meetings of the board shall take place every quarter. An extraordinary meeting shall be facilitated between scheduled meetings to attend to urgent matters. The general body shall meet quarterly to be apprised of the activities of the Board of Trustees. And, of course, an important aspect as of the administration of the fund itself, contributions are to be paid on or before the 15th of the following month. Separate accounts shall be maintained to ensure that funds are not used to pay pensions or other benefits due under the Social Security or any other act. The fund shall not be tied to any resources of Social Security, the government, or any other state corporation. The fund shall not be used to cover payments to employees due to wrongful and unfair dismissal. Only legitimate severance claims as described in the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code would qualify for funding. A vesting period of 5 years shall be given to build the financial basis of the fund before claims get made to the fund, or to be made from the fund, from the fund. The Board of Trustees shall be given the remit to explore opportunities for investment. Listen to this again. The Board of Trustees shall be given the remit to explore opportunities for investment. So to the extent that over that 5-year period, you'll be able to, and beyond, you're able to generate funds. You may want to look at possible investment of some of those funds in order to generate even more income. The funds collected under the Severance Protection Fund shall be remitted to an interest-bearing account at one or more financial institutions. All those things will have to be properly worked out, and we have a clear understanding as to exactly how that is going to be instituted. Monies will be paid into the Social Security scheme, and the said funds shall be transmitted and paid into an interest-bearing account as designated by the Board of Trustees. Now, what amount should we be asking the employers to put into this fund? A sum equivalent to 0.50% of the total payroll of the employer shall be paid into the Social Security scheme on or before the 14th of the following month for onward transmission. In the event that there is a business failure and the employer's remittances fall below the sum total that is payable or owed, the employer shall cover the difference between what is available from the fund and the amount owed to the employees and the amount owed to the employees, right? So what that is basically saying is that the employer would have contributed X amount into the fund up to a particular point, right? Huh? Yes, because it's... yes, that will be the agency that is being proposed. You may have other ideas, but that's the agency, it will go into the Social Security Fund. Huh? Scheme. Huh? Uh-huh. Yeah, the Social Security scheme. All right. No, I mean, that's a suggestion. We may come up with another mechanism, but it was felt that the Social Security scheme is already established, and it has a mechanism already in place where employers have to, make contributions. So it was felt that that would be the agency, right? But of course, we had mentioned earlier on how that will be administered, and the fact that you cannot, do anything with the funds other than what it was designed to do. Because we recognize that there may be concerns in that area. And it says here, it was the Board of Trustees shall administer, and the Social Security scheme or board shall collect severance payment contributions on behalf of the Board of Trustees. They are therefore, that is, the Social Security Board is vested with the responsibility of collecting the contributions on behalf of the Board of Trustees, and such contributions shall be payable at the office of the Social Security Board. Now, it speaks to the whole question of penalties, where the payment of contribution is in default. the defaulting employer shall become liable to pay, in addition to such contributions, a penalty of a sum equivalent to 10% of such contributions, and where such contribution is not paid to the Commissioner after a period of 30 days, after such contribution has been in default, a penalty of a sum equivalent to 1% of the contribution in respect to each further period of 30 days. Provided that a defaulting employer shall not be required to pay the penalty under this section if A, the defaulting employer proves to the satisfaction of the Board of Trustees that the failure of payment was due to circumstances beyond his control. And there's something else. It says here, if the defaulting employer furnishes to the Board of Trustees a correct return of the emoluments and pays the amount in default. Now, what I'm saying is that this is a proposal that we're looking at. One of the other things that is not specifically captured here, but is important that we give that consideration, that we set it up that the funds will be placed in a trust. Yes? We can have some further discussion and development on that aspect of it. Whether or not it should or could be an amendment to either the Social Security Act or the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code. You have to deal with that. The other one is we need to set out the official lineup in the law. Let me make sure I get this right. Set out the official lineup in the law. Office holders. Oh, I see. The office holders, yes. Yeah. And the timeline for severance to be paid. That is one of the considerations that we'll have to look at. And of course, the setting up of an audit to audit the funds, the contributions, and the funds of the contributors. So this is something that we have been looking at in terms of taking us to the next taking us upwards and forwards, yes, as it relates to employee protection. And so this is what we have to look at, and I'm quite sure the panel will deal with this matter. This just the opportunity is given to give you a little outline of what is it that we're asking you to endorse. And coming out of this conference, it's going to be very important that we make a decision that this is definitely the way to go, and to do it in a manner that clearly demonstrates that we are serious about what we want to see happen in this regard. Thank you very much.
All right, let's thank former Prime Minister Baldwin Spence again for his presentation. Deeply appreciated. So at this time, we think this discussion is very important, not just to the people in this room, but to all citizens, residents across Antigua and Barbuda. So we're streaming this live on our Facebook page, and we want to encourage you to share this discussion. You can take out your phones, share the live, so that everyone can get in on this important conversation that we're having here today because it affects everyone in this country. Do you agree with me? Yes. It does. So we invested the resources to make sure that we can bring this discussion and conversation to as many people as possible. Now, as we move forward this afternoon, we want to invite to the podium the Deputy Labour Commissioner, Mr. Pascal Kentish. He also has a presentation and some input to make on this very important and critical subject of severance protection. Let us welcome him.
You'll get me online. Okay, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Mr. General Secretary and members, for inviting me here to talk about severance pay fund, severance pay protection. So, the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Code provides that where an employee has passed his probation period, the employer shall not dismiss such an employee without a just cause. That is section C56 of the code. Section C58 outlines the just causes for dismissal of an employee. One such just cause is redundancy. Section C58 subsection 1 paragraph C. Section C40 states that an employee whose term of employment with his employer and the predecessor employer has in aggregate exceeded 1 year is entitled to severance pay by reason of redundancy. For completeness, let me give the definition for redundancy. So redundancy means in a situation in which by lack of customer orders, retrenchment, the installation of labor-saving machinery, and employers going out of business, a force majeure, or any other reason, work which a person was last employed to perform has ceased or substantially diminished. Sorry. So, it therefore means that an employer is responsible for the payment of severance pay in a redundancy situation. Over the years, many companies and businesses have closed their doors or gone out of business without the employee receiving their severance pay. In the past, one may have heard of Castle Harbour, Flamingo Hotel. Those were before my time in the labour market. I subsequently joined the labour market. Since then, we have had Benji's, Grand Princess, and most recently, Liat and Caribbean Airport Services. These workers would have spent the better part of their lives toiling for these employers, only to find at the end of the day that there was nothing for them to take home. While I'm not a spokesman for the National Labour Board, and I was not given a message by the board to bring to this conference, I can say with certainty that a severance pay fund is within the consciousness of the board. And as a result, the board has drafted a provision to be inserted in the Labour Code. This, I believe, if and when it is passed, will be a great step forward for this country for the securing of severance payment to workers at the end of their working life due to redundancy. A severance pay fund is not a novel idea. There are at least 2 other countries within the Caribbean with such a provision. It is my personal view that such a fund is desirable and is long overdue. In closing, I would like to put workers of this country on notice. We may be looking at a severance per fund. But there is another very important issue that needs to be addressed, and that is unemployment benefit. While the severance pay fund comes from the employer's purse, the unemployment fund would come from the employee's pocket. Workers may not be happy with any more deductions from their pay, but COVID-19 ought to have taught us a lesson. That an unemployment fund is a necessary evil. I say evil for those who may not be happy to see any more deductions from their pay. This is just a word to the wise. Thank you.
The host has disappeared. All right. We're going to move right along. And I just want to say that when I thought of this fund, I saw what was happening to workers in Antigua and Barbuda. I saw the future of artificial intelligence. I saw the future where you had a lot of companies that were entering Antigua, setting up what I call businesses that are operated by computers, and then they shut down the network, leave the computers behind, and they're overseas on the first notion purporting they're going on a business trip and never return to Antigua. That sounds familiar, right? That happened very early, and I think Mr. Kennedy should have left them out. I think a group that was working just upstairs where the Labor Department was now. I don't remember the name of the center, but it was an offshore company. It was, right? You all remember it? Upstairs? Casa Sport? NASA Sport. These sport books were coming into Antigua fast and furious. And they were setting up establishments. And I think there was a group of employees who, when they got to work the morning, the building was still locked. And they have not received their severance up to today. All right? This could happen tomorrow because you have a lot of call centers now. All right? You have all these different businesses that are coming in. You don't know the individuals from whence they came. So we ought to know, one, register every employer. It could be you as a worker having a maid or cleaner at your home every week. Every employer should be registered and should be made to pay into that fund to protect their employees once redundancy becomes the norm. So this is the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union looking into the future. Not just the vision of Chester Hughes, but the vision of an organization that is looking after the well-being and welfare of the working class in Antigua and Barbuda. Another level of social protection for our people. We have the severance that is taken care of. But that protection now, that responsibility to have it set aside, that the worker should not have to wait, should not have to be worried, should not have to be protesting. Because had we not reached a settlement with Jolly Beach, that would have been another group that would have been on the list. And not every company today have the level of assets that will be able to take care of the liability of severance. There's some companies, some of you work for them in here. Some of you are working presently for companies who do not have the asset base to take care of your liability of severance down the road. And this is very much for your protection, your social protection. Brothers and sisters, although the labor code speaks to the whole question, and earlier in the conference I did allude to taking the case to court. The code itself allows for us to take the employer to court. For those who are not familiar with the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code, C50, not 50, C54 or 55, 55 says, an employee may recover by civil proceedings in a court of competent jurisdiction the severance pay to which he is entitled under the Act. So, as I said in the conference, our cause to take CAS to court is just and fair because we've waited long enough for them to settle on the employee's account. And C55 goes on to say, in the event of bankruptcy or liquidation of a business, the employer or on any other closure of business, the amount owing to an employee as severance shall be paid in priority to other debts. And the Companies Act also allows for severance to be given that priority at the head of the list. So, brothers and sisters, today this discussion is about your future in the world of work. Another level of social protection for you as employees. It takes a hurricane. COVID showed us how vulnerable some of our hotel plants were, that they had to take loans to pay severance to their employees. Believe you me, a number of hotels in this country had to go into the bank to get loans to pay severance to their employees and mortgage the properties. Just imagine if we had this severance protection fund and we have another pandemic such as COVID, that workers would not have to worry about the protection of their equity, but that Social Security would be ready and prepared to start releasing funds on instructions of the committee in charge of such funds. That is the reality of such a fund. So this is visionary, this is forward thinking, and this is union at work in the interest of our membership at large and the wider society. So I just want to add those few comments to the discourse and to say that here at the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union, it all started with the enactment of the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code by Donald Halstead and so on as trade unionists and the late George Walter. Then we went into the protection of our people through Social Security and the establishment of the Social Security Fund through Mr. Princehurst. And now we're looking further now in this new generation of leaders for the protection of severance for our members who have become more vulnerable than our members of the past. The worker today is more vulnerable to be mistreated than workers of the past because of new forms of doing business in Antigua and Barbuda and throughout the rest of the world. So I will leave it right there, and I will allow the moderator to direct us to the next presenter.
Again, just to reiterate what Brother Hughes said, this is revolutionary and forward-thinking strategy that your union is putting in place for you, the workers of this country. Let's hear it for the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union. At this time, I want to call to the podium, or perhaps to the head table where she is already seated, another individual who helped to give us some guidance and made some input into the research that we did into this possible severance protection fund. Let's welcome Ms. Cassandra Simon. Correction, Cassandra P. Simon. She's very adamant about that because, of course, there exists another Cassandra Simon somewhere in Antigua and Barbuda. Again, Cassandra P. Simon. Thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon all. So my purpose here is to take out the emotion of the discussion. I am not a revolutionist. And I've worn both hats. I've been an employee and now I'm self-employed, so it means that I'm an employee of myself. So, as Edge Hill stated, I was invited by the very lovely looking Mrs. Luke down there to meet with the committee and make a presentation. And then she called me again and she wants me again. And I'm like, what is my claim to fame? I have no idea about, labor relations, etc. But I'm an accountant by profession, and based on that involvement, I do interact a lot with companies, and obviously I have employees, and I have been an employee. And I'm very interested in Social Security. My man there in the third row, I call him my man. His wife knows that he is my man. Not in the intimate sense, but he is always the man with the plan. Anything I want to know about Social Security, I call Eugene. And if Eugene doesn't know, he will direct me to somebody who knows. So I'm starting now today, and I'm looking at severance and the whole discussion of making it mandatory in terms of having this fund. And I wouldn't say brother, because obviously I'm not a member of the union, but okay, fine. So Brother Spencer, I heard your discourse, and I like it. It's revolutionary, as Brother Chester said. However, lots of times, what we desire and what is actually possible is two different things. And I tell my children, and I tell people all the time, when I was 16 years of age, my plan was to finish school, get a good job, and become a millionaire by the time I'm 25. That was a long time ago. I have finished school because at 16, 25 seems far away. I finished school, I've gotten jobs, but I'm still not a millionaire. So the point I'm trying to make, something on paper and something in actuality are two different things. It's a dream. Not saying it's not realistic, but it's a dream. So there are two types of severance. We have voluntary severance, and we also have our mandatory severance, which is what we're looking at today in terms of what the labor code has dictated. But I want to say something about voluntary severance as well. So the intent of severance is to cushion that period when you're out of employment, obviously for circumstances beyond your control. So I know there have been this, Mr. Kent just said it, many companies. I'm not aware of it, I'm probably too young to know many. What I deal in is figures. I want statistics. Tell me 2%, 3%, 5%. Because once I hear many, I get scared. Because it's possible it may happen to me. We've also had the situations where we have had voluntary severance. And a few years ago, we offered voluntary severance to the teachers, and a lot of them took it. And then we had a discussion as whether it was a good move or not. We have situations where we have certain companies, because obviously, when you get to a certain level in organization, you have had 35 years, you are an expensive asset. I say asset, but you are expensive. Because each year, you get a percentage increase on your salary. Your vacation entitlement increases. Perhaps your sick entitlement increases. And every increase you get, you pay more to Mr. Hurst at Social Security, because it's a percentage. Medical benefits too. I'm not going to browbeat you today. And now with the severance fund, you pay more as well. Now we always talk about the amount, the impact on the employees' pay. And when I met with Mrs. Luke and her committee, I spoke to the cost of employment. Payroll is the single highest cost to every business worldwide, not just Antigua and Barbuda. It is the single highest cost. When you get your pay slip and you see your gross pay, you say this little. But remember, your employer has to add on 8.5% to Social Security, 3.5% in medical benefit, whatever the contribution is for medical insurance, and again, a pension insurance, and now we're talking about a severance contribution. So it's the single highest, and most time, it is the only thing that an employer can control, the only cost. We can't tell APO how much to bill us. The insurance company, some insurances are mandatory, workman comp, public liability. So most times, the only controllable cost in the business is payroll. So an employer may come and say, heck, take voluntary severance. And of course, they're going to package it and tell you, well, opportunity to take it now, go off and live your dream, etc., etc. What do you have to think about? Your age. How old are you? What's the time period for retirement? And we have this conversation going on now because with Social Security increasing the age of retirement, some companies have left their age at 60. It means you retire at 60, you get your company pension if there is one. And again, myth. Not every company has a pension plan. I have never worked anywhere where my employer has offered me pension or medical. Never worked anywhere where they've offered that. So not every employer has a pension plan. So when you leave that employer at 60, you may be out there waiting on Social Security fund to come in 5 years after. Your current financial needs. Are you 55 and going to the bank for a mortgage to pay until you're 70? Employability. There are lots of persons who have gotten severance because their employers had the funds to pay them, and they're still out there squinting trying to find a job. So if your employer offers you voluntary severance, these are some of the things you have to think about. Are you at an age? When I worked, well, it was a semi-employment, but they offered me a chance to join the group medical. They paid it in full, $114 a month. They paid it, I didn't have to pay it. When I left that, and I now need to get my personnel, mine cost me $270. So I went from not paying any at 114 to pay 270 for myself. And then being a group plan, no medical, now I have to do medical, and they exclude because I have fibroids. So I cannot claim anything for fibroids. So those are the kind of things you have to consider. And what are the years to retire? So this is voluntary severance. We're going to go on to the mandatory severance now. And I looked further afield because even though we're looking at the Caribbean, and we've looked at Trinidad, and we've looked at Barbados, and we've looked at St. Kitts, I'm looking because when they call on the radio, they like to say, in the US, and in the UK, and in the Canada. Because, we're Antiguans, we have big dreams. I do too. So in the UK, there is no legal right for severance. None. What normally happens is that employees negotiate. So if you know you're marketable, you know the value of the skills you offer, when somebody offers you a job, especially if you're a contracted employee, or your union is being revolutionary and negotiating your CBA, they put that in there for severance. But the government has not mandated any severance. Not like our labor code that says you're entitled to it. Okay? Severance pay in the US. Again, unless it's in the employee's contract, there is no right to it. I looked at Canada. Canada does have a severance pay. But you hear how much it is? 2 days regular wages for each full year that you worked. 2 days. But you've gone from none in the US, you have gone from none in the US, none in the UK to 2 days. Okay? Right. So be grateful for small mercies. Now, Mr. Kensher spoke about it, unemployment benefits. And I think 2009 when we had the recession, there was a talk of having an unemployment fund. That seems to be more preferable to a severance fund. And I'll tell you why. Now, in the US, we have SUTA, which is a state unemployment tax. Only the employer pays that, except for 3 states, being New Jersey. Let me do FUTA. So we have FUTA, which is the federal unemployment tax. Both of these are paid only by the employers. There's no employee contribution on these. So here for the FUTA, it does not pay employees directly. It is like a grandfather. So it says here, The state can borrow from the federal government's unemployment fund. Now, I don't know how they pay back, because they didn't have it in the first place. How are they going to pay it back? So you see where I'm going here? So the same thing with our consideration here. We are paying these things in. We have put, from your presentation, Brother Baldwin, we have put things in the act to say you should not borrow for it for this purpose, not to commingle it for whatever not. Sometimes easier said than done. So who pays? Only employers pay the FUTA, which is a federal tax. The SUTA, which is a state tax, only employers pay, except for 3 states, being Alaska, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, where the employees are expected to contribute. So it's a little different from what we are proposing here. What are the rates of contributions? And you will see it says for 2022 and 2023, the rate is 6% on the first 7,000, and it can vary by state and range, as SUTA, which is a state tax, vary by state and range from 0.05% to 10.5%. So it really depends on state. Now, here you will see it speaks about a particular year, 2022 and 2023. So I am thinking that somewhere along the line, there is some sort of actuarial review, which of course is a cost, and there is recommendation, which I hope we will follow, not like the Social Security scheme. Board, sorry, not a scheme, board. I hope when our actuary, which we pay every 3 years, make recommendations that the board will follow through, or will be in the same position as we are now with Social Security. But you see the rates. It ranges from 0.05% to 10.5%, depending on which state. Unemployment benefits in Canada. So in Canada, you have an unemployment fund called the Employment Insurance. It's a basic rate. You're entitled to 55% of the average insured weekly earnings up to $650 weekly. So not just bam, we give it to you like that. It's an unemployment benefit intended to bridge the gap, which is what Severance is supposed to be as well. But they are doing it with unemployment based on the fact that you're unemployed. It provides temporary income support to unemployed workers while they look for employment or to upgrade their skills. So I like the fact that even though you're upgrading your skills, you're temporarily employed because you're looking to upgrade your skills, you can access this unemployment insurance. A claimant can qualify to receive from 14 weeks up to a maximum of 45 weeks. And not in my presentation, but one of the other things as well is that they have to claim, they have to show a pattern, some sort of plan as to how they're going about finding and seeking employment. So not just say, well, I'm entitled to 45 weeks, I sit down and watch Netflix and continue getting the people's money. And there's a maximum. So obviously, if you're working for like $1,000 a week, the maximum you're getting is $650. You have to bridge the gap between that $350 that's there. Who pays in Canada? So employees in Canada are required to deduct employment insurance premiums from each dollar of the employee's insurable earnings. So this is the difference between Canada and the US. The US, employer only. In Canada, the employee makes a contribution, but the employer tops it up with 1.4 times what the employee has put in. Similar to what our Social Security here is. It's a shared contribution. Unemployment in the UK. So in the UK, we have a job seekers allowance, JSA. It's a government benefit and provides financial support to individuals who are looking for work. The contributions comes from the national insurance contribution, and we've heard talk about that here as well. It's changing the whole scheme that we have from social and medical to a national insurance contribution fund. It is made by employed individuals. Now, the last paragraph of this, and I have Treasury highlighted in red. If the fund is insufficient, the Treasury tops it up. Now, if that is possible in Antigua and Barbuda, I don't know. But in the UK, well, Mr. Ketch is here saying wishful thinking. A lot of it is wishful thinking, but we have to look at the reality of it. The pension, the severance protection fund, as I understand it, It is what we call a defined benefit, because the labor code sets out what you're entitled to. 2 weeks pay if you're with a certain level, and a month if you're with another level. So you know what your benefit is. I can sit here, if I was working with somebody, and decide, listen, I want severance, and I can calculate what I'm entitled to. So it's a defined benefit. The issue we're having with Social Security is because it's a defined benefit. The issue we're having in a lot of pension plans, defined benefit. And that's why people are changing to defined contribution. You get out what you put in. Because defined benefit plans are bankrupting companies, and they are killing us. So it's not Social Security in Antigua alone that's having issues. Social Security across the world is having issues based on the simple fact that they are defined benefit plans. I know of a pension plan that guarantees a 4% interest rate. When that plan was defined, that was when interest rates was 6% on savings. Now, interest rates are 2% to none, nil to none. But you're paying out 4% and you're only getting 2%. I heard that the protection fund will be allowed to invest overseas. There are limitations by the Insurance Act on what pension funds can invest in. It can only be invested here or in the CARICOM regions, and it mostly is government securities. So we don't have access. So a lot of defined benefit plans also are failing, and the employer / the Treasury have to make up the difference. So if the Treasury is not available to make up that difference, we are in deep. We're in deep, right? So in the UK, the national insurance rates, if you're an employee, in 2023-24 again, because in these international jurisdictions, it's not set in stone that we pay back. Each year it is reviewed. And I'm expecting that, where are we now, 2023? By 2024 midterm, I'm going to hear Social Security coming and say they did a review, and we are going to increase the age of retirement to 70, and the rates of contribution are going to clip. Hello, realistic, we are being realistic here. So maybe, oh Lord, but this is what we need. Brother Hurst, what's the age of retirement in Barbados now? Okay, so Brother Hurst just said it. Barbados is going to 67.5. It's reality. It's survival. Okay, so in the UK, the NIS rates, if you're employed, for 2023-24, employees pay 12% if they're class 1, and 2% on earnings over £50,000. Now, this is pounds, but we say dollar per dollar. So if you compare and see what an employee is paying to NIS in the UK as opposed to what we pay here. Currently, we pay 6.5 to Social Security and 3.5 to medical benefits, which means we're paying 10. They're paying 12, and then we have the Board of Education. The NIS is paid on salary, commission or bonuses, overtime, sick pay, and I have highlighted maternity and paternity pay. Now in Antigua, our maternity pay is tax-free. In the UK, it is taxed. Yes. Who pays in the UK? So in addition to the employee paying, the employer pays, and the employer pays at the rate of 13.8%. Again, that is the rate for 2023-2024. And you also have a class 2 contributions, which is $3.45, pounds, but I'm going dollars, and paid, for this is self-employed. If you're self-employed, you must pay as well. And I want to, because I picked up a copy of your magazine, and I saw there's a whole write-up on Social Security. Obviously, it's a very topical topic. And compliance. And that is the elephant in the room. So it's one thing to say all employers must be registered and all employers must be paid in, but we know to the construction industry, and everybody knows. I tell my clients all the time, they're in the construction industry, go to Employers Federation and do a service call. Find out if you are subcontracting or you have employees, because the line is very thin. And I've known of persons on Jumbi Bay, and when Labor Department go up to Jumbi Bay, they're jumping into the sea and trying to swim to Antigua because they don't have work permits. That is the reality. Okay? So compliance. How much goes into this fund? So Social Security has been mandatory. medical benefit is mandatory. Board of education is mandatory. But how many persons throw in? I heard an interview with the representative of the Taxi Association, and he's saying, oh, write off the arrears and let us go forward. Now, if you write off the arrears, what happens? Because these taxes, they are social taxes. So I know we get upset when we hear David Messiah saying, oh, we need to have more children. And I hear somebody saying to me, oh, have more children, you can't pay the maternity benefits. I'm not calling no name, okay? Okay. You would hear that, okay? And then take for instance myself. So I had a discussion with Eugene, I tell you he's my man. So I don't have any independence, I'm not married. And plus, we haven't caught up, the law hasn't caught up to reality. So today or tomorrow, at my young age, and I die, I get, well, my beneficiaries get $2,500 to bury me, and that can't bury me. So I have been working since I'm 17 years of age, and I've been at the maximum 45 and 65 for a number of years. Do you know what I get on the Social Security? Nothing. But that's the reality, because it takes 9 live contributors to pay 1 pension. If you do the math, and you look at how much you contribute on an annual basis, including your employer amount, don't take into consideration anything for administrative fee and to pay for the hearse. You will take out of Social Security more with the first 5 years than you have contributed in 40 years of employment. It's the reality, because it's a defined benefit scheme. So lots of us have to fall off the system through that than what stay on to make it possible. Reality. Okay? So I looked at St. Kitts and the Severance, the Protection of Employment Act in St. Kitts. The severance payments are not part of Social Security contributions, even though they're collected by Social Security. And I know my little Spanish friend there, he had this thing about Social Security fund. But I think his question was valid in that the concept is we're paying it into Social Security. Social Security already has issues. How do we ensure that the issues that we have in Social Security don't affect this fund? But I also want to say, because I'm going back to the concept of many companies have failed. And I had a sidebar with Mr. Kentish, and what he said to me, because I said, you know, well, is government expected, government being the largest employer, is government expected to contribute to this fund? Because if you look at it on a risk base, the risk of companies failing and having to pay severance, what sector does that apply to? We read in your magazine that the hotel sector, obviously, is extremely vulnerable. But is government vulnerable? Government employees are considered to be fireproof. Government is not going to find a body. Government cannot fail. It's continuous. They just form another tax and they get money. They borrow, they get money. Right? So is government going to be part of the severance fund? Because the risk of government failing is slim to shady. It is not possible for government to fail. Right? Large companies like the banks, the insurance companies, what is the risk of them failing? And they have a lot of payroll. Yes, CLECO. But then CLECO failed because of regulations. So what we need to do is to find a civil attorney to sue the government. Because I'm supposed to, yes, I need to find a civil attorney to sue the government. We are supposed to rest assured at night that the ECCB is monitoring the banks, and we have had some bank failures, but ECCB has stepped in and found a solution. We have FSRC monitoring the insurance companies. They're supposed to, or their owner, being the government, they're supposed to step in and find a solution for things like CLECO. So that's not even a risk, because there's no way that CLECO should have failed, because we have regulators regulating CLECO. And when they got to the brink of not compliance, they should have shut them down, frozen the assets, and made sure they paid out employees and contributors. So in that example, it's not just employees that lost. Contributors lost, and much more than employees, because of failure to regulate. So we look at it in terms of the severance protection plan on a risk basis. where is the risk of companies failing? Now, I don't know if I misinterpreted, but based on what I understood, if that particular company doesn't have enough in the fund, they will put in the difference. Is that what? Okay. So I don't know if that's going to work. So if we look, say, at LIAT, and we have a 5-year vesting period, what is LIAT's employment total in terms of their salary? At 0.5%, how much goes in over 5% over 5 years? And what is their severance? If LIAT doesn't have enough to pay the severance, where is the asset going to come from to make up the difference? So it has to be just like the Social Security, a social fund, and every employee amount that goes in there is going to be available to pay out the severance fund. It cannot be specific. It's not a pension. You have an asset and say, well, listen, this belongs to Antigua Barbuda Workers Union, this belongs to Veranda Hotel, Pineapple Hotel, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what you need to look at is the risks of severance happening by industry, and probably maybe have a differential rate for the industry as opposed to those companies like maybe the banks and insurance companies, which the possibility of them failing, not impossible, but low. Because you're going to have, as I said earlier, payroll is the single highest cost of doing business. And when you go to a company and say, heck, you got to put more in, they may object. Because what is the risk of me failing? I am putting in money to pay Tommy and Dickie, but Harry here not getting no benefit from it. There are lots of us in this room, well, not me because I have children, but there are lots of people who object to paying Board of Education employment levy because they have no children. It's a social fund. So when I hear that, I say to them, yes, you don't have any children, but that money you put in educates people who will attend to you at the banks, who will treat you at the hospital, the nurses, et cetera, et cetera. So this protection fund has to be a social tax, just like Social Security, just like medical benefits, just like Board of Education. And what goes in the fund pays the severance. But personally, I would prefer an unemployment fund as opposed to a severance fund. And I'll tell you why. There are lots of persons who limit themselves because of severance. They would tell you they're in a dead-end job. There's nowhere to go. They're unhappy. But I now left my severance. Because severance. I had a conversation with a young lady. She worked at ABI. And just before ABI failed, she moved to another bank. And I said to her, you missed out on your severance. She said, no. I did a calculation, and based on how many years I had and the severance I would have been entitled to, by making that move, I made more. The longest I've ever worked in any entity is now working for myself. But prior to that, the longest I've ever worked is 4.5 years. I got severance once in a very acrimonious employment. My boss and I didn't get along. And within my 12th month, he said, you know what, we can't afford you, so we're going to sever you. I said, fine, no problem. I got my 1 month's lieu of notice, and I got my severance. And 2 months after, the company went belly up, and I was the only one to ever get severance because they didn't have the funds. And that was where the source of the acrimony was. You are spending too much. We need to stick to budget, or you're watching pennies. I was the only one to get my severance. So that's the only instance that I've ever gotten severance. But I've moved, I have moved, and I have moved. I did 10 years in government. And when I left, I remember my mother said, you're leaving your 10 years? It's not the 10 years I'm leaving. It's a 23 1/3 before I'm even entitled to a pension. The difference between my pay and the person above me was $200 a month. How long does it take me to get there? So I went to an interview. Somebody invited me to an interview. They said, I'll pay you $500 more than you're making now. I said, thank you very much. And I went back and I typed my resignation letter and I handed it in and I went. Because I'm confident in my ability, right? And I know I am employable. So that is pretty much, we look at these things and I understand. So we have had COVID and there was actual cases. But are we being reactionary to something that happened, which we never repeat? Because before COVID, The last pandemic was 1902. There's nobody in here that even have a relative that could tell them what the experience was. When we heard about COVID and we heard about the Spanish flu, we went online, we started researching Spanish flu. How many persons heard anything about the Spanish flu before COVID? Okay, one person did history lessons. So my preference would be not for a severance protection fund, but possibly an employment insurance that not only covers you when you have lost your employment, but also takes into consideration that you can access that fund if you're trying to upgrade yourself. Because there are too many persons who have been severed and find themselves unable to find work because they have been very comfortable in their fireproof job and have not upgraded their skills. And I know Brother Chester spoke about artificial intelligence. It is staring us in the face. So that's my presentation today. Brothers and sisters, because I'm allowed to use that. Yes. And I saw my friend here from Liat, my Spanish colleague, anxious to ask questions. Please direct it to Mr. Kentish.
You're free to approach the mic. For me, I think the state of the law provides for severance to be paid. And what C2 paragraph F states, and this is what you're really getting, what you get as severance pay is basically the goodwill that you help to build up your employer. Because goodwill has value, and so the work that you put in creates some goodwill for that company. And so what the law says, as an individual works at a job, he gradually earns an equity therein above and beyond his periodic wages, privileges and allowances, and it says that equity must be protected. And so what you find is when the court is compensating you for unfair dismissal, the first head of compensation is loss of protection. Loss of protection is calculated on the basis of severance pay. Because what the court has said, they are paying you that amount for the wrong that was done to you by your employer by terminating you, when if you had not been terminated unfairly, then at the end of the day, you may very well get that severance pay. So, for me, a severance pay fund is vital because the law calls for it to be paid. We have seen a few companies, I was going to say many, we have seen a few companies who have closed their doors, and my list was not exhausted. Let me just add. The few companies that I call, there are a lot more. There are a number of restaurants where the workers were told, don't come to work this day, and when they show up the following day, the place is chained, and then in the night, you get report that equipment are being moved out. Their employees have approached the Labor Department to try and put a stop order to those employers leaving the country. But we just can't do it like that. You have to have a court order to stop. Well, he has the power, and he has the friends. He has the friends that can do that.
Well, he did fight for friends too.
That maybe so, right? But you need a court order, so you tag that person an absconding debtor. So if that person is deemed an absconding debtor, then you can stop him from traveling to satisfy his debt before he goes, right? But we sometimes find creative ways to enforce the laws, right, Eugene? I will stop there, have the good brother ask a question, and because I see you are anxious. Be careful. The last man who was anxious, you know what happened to him.
Abram Samuels, Aviation Airlines. Well, Brother Kent, you're assuming that I wanted to ask a question. It's not a question I wanted to ask. I just wanted to make a recommendation. But before I do that, I would like to say that when Sister Cassandra said that some persons say they're not leaving the severance, is because some of them don't know better. They don't realize that, especially in the private sector, unless there is a pension plan, that there is no severance to get unless the company makes you redundant. My recommendation I wanted to say, after hearing Brother Baldwin speak, I think that if and when the severance fund comes about, that the audited statements should be made available to those companies within the fund that are unionized, should be made available to the union, so the union can have an idea if the companies that the members are working for is actually contributing to the fund, and if the contribution is up to date.
The fund, I think, would be managed by a public official. And the government has a way of notifying persons publicly. And that is by way of the official gazette. And so if the accounts are published in the official gazette, it is deemed at the notice of all who live.
My issue is that I don't trust the government. Okay? Straight across the board. Don't trust the government. So it's better that the union, I'm a union person, so it's better that the union can look first and have the assessment and say, okay, this is what it is. They can't trust government.
No, but remember what I said. It is going to be managed by a public official. So it's not trusting the government only, it's trusting the public official to manage the fund.
Brother Eugene?
Yes, Eugene Hurst, banking and insurance. I just need to ask a couple of questions. First of all, what is the severance calculation? Labor code severance calculation?
1 day is pay for each month of employment.
Okay.
And managers, 1 month pay for each year.
All right. So if we're looking at 1 day, let's use simple math. Person working for $500 a week. 1 day is $100. Using a 4-week month, that is $2,000. So it's 100 over 2,000, or 0.05%. So that's the first thing that I'm looking at in the recommendation for the severance fund. Because I think what was said was 5%.
No, 0.5%. 0.5.
0.5?
0.5 was
okay. It should be 0.05 for those individuals. Persons working weekly, it would be 0.05. For a person working monthly, it would be 1 over 12, or approximately 8%. Now, when you look at it, what Cassandra was speaking about with the fruiter, that is actually what they're doing. There's between 0.05 and 10.5%. Now, what happens to those persons who have CBAs, where the CBA speaks about a different percentage? How do we deal with those? If we are paying into a fund, how do you deal with those individuals that have a different calculation? Right? Going on, I think it was said that it was a percentage of payroll, but payroll includes different things. Severance is paid under basic, so that is something that we also have to look at. I accept about the unemployment fund. However, I have an issue with the unemployment fund, in that we are so far behind the 8 ball that even introducing an unemployment fund now, we're going to have a problem. Right? We would use Barbados. Barbados has had an unemployment fund for 40 odd years. And that fund went bust with the crisis, world crisis, and then COVID. Now, do we have the money to inject, as you're saying? Can the Treasury top it up? Treasury can't even pay what they have to pay now. So what do we top up? Right? You said it very well when you spoke about Social Security, in that we promise a lot that we can't deliver because we have not been keeping up with the times. Social Security was never expected to pay people for as long as we have been paying them. In fact, when I look at the regulations, Social Security didn't even intend to pay a pension, as in an age pension. To me, they intended to pay a survivor's pension. They intended to pay the wife who had to stay home and couldn't work and earn anything. And I say that based on life expectancy. Life expectancy has gone up. So nobody expected for Social Security to be carrying persons for 20 odd years. So again, how do we expect to do all of this with what we have? And as my wife was saying, my other wife was saying, Social Security goes up 0.25% and will continue to go up. You have the, what do you call it, National Health Insurance that is supposed to come on stream, which I believe is going to push up medical benefits. You have the increase in, everything else, the cost of living. So what exactly is going to be happening? And I'm just saying that and just throwing it out so that we understand what we're facing.
Go ahead, Brother Zin, because we're live online and we don't want to hear no air to be lost. We're online, persons are watching.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thanks.
Zinwell Christopher, where work again? Airport Authority. I'm not here in any way trying to be negative about the presentations, right? I'm here basically trying to get some education and some information per se. What's your wife's name again? Miss Cassandra? Simon, okay.
Simon.
You spoke about the Social Security. And based on what Mr. Hurst just presented, when we look at it, the system is already set. We have the former Prime Minister, Mr. Barwin Spencer, sitting here, so he would be really au fait with what's going on, being at the helm for 10 years. The Social Security issue, is there any light at the end of the tunnel to end in what's going on? Here is why I ask. Based on your presentation, Ms. Simon, right? Now, one of the problems that we have had in this country, I can't speak for other countries, is that a lot of our retirees go back to work on contract, right? That digs into the fund. Now, we had the pandemic. A high percentage of the deaths were elderlies, right? They die without a child, under the age of 18. So their so-called pension or their funds go back into the government coffers, right? In my opinion, just my humble opinion, the government wins on that end? Because a lot of money goes back in, but how do we still end up in such a deep hole when it comes to Social Security? I'm just asking because I'm trying to figure out, is this going to end? Because we have thousands of children in school. Are we saying to them by the time you get out of school there's going to be no Social Security?
Sorry. Mr. Hurst, I think, will be the best man to answer that question. But let me say to you, will it ever end? No. It's always going to be a struggle, but Social Security will not go away. It is a government scheme, and the government must make good on it. So I don't have no fear that if I get to age, whatever it will be by the time I'm ready to retire, that I'm going to put in my little paperwork, and I probably take an early pension. I'm going to take the 0.5% hit per month, and I'm going to take an early pension because I want to make sure I get something out of it, right? But there will be something for me and for everybody because the government must make good. Now, you asked the question about how did we get here, and it's pretty much bad management. It's the same with LIAT. I hear everybody talk about LIAT, whatever not, and whether government is responsible for the pension. And legally, government is not responsible. The shareholders are not responsible for LIAT pension. But because of government continually topping up and showing up LIAT, because of LIAT going to markets that are not profitable, and the governments have not put in anything as shareholders. Now, if I was managing LIAT, I'm not going to no country that don't put money into LIAT and is not a shareholder. That is how I will do it. So because of government having topped up LIAT, there's a precedent set that morally they're responsible for the pension. So it's very bad management. So we have a government that doesn't normally pay in its contributions. We have compliance issues. I mean, there are lots of people, not just government alone, private sector people, don't pay into Social Security. So the money is not there. And people will say, oh, find better investment. Where? There's absolutely no investment that's there that's going to pay you the level of return. What Social Security board, and I've been saying to Mr. Kentridge that we need to find some civil lawyer that can sue the board, because Social Security by law has a very bipartisan board. There is union representation. There is Employers Federation representation. There is Chamber of Commerce representation. And I think there should be somebody as well from the church as well, correct? So you have, no, from the church. Who is the next person? There are two from the union? Two
from the union, two represent the employers, two from the government, and the church.
Correct. So why are we in this state when we have such a bipartisan, tripartite, what you want to call it, sort of board representation? Why are we in this state, Mr. Hurst? I know you're not the director, so it's an unfair question, right? So it will never die. We will wait for our pension, we will wait for maternity benefits, we will wait for our sick leave, but at the end of the day, it must be paid. So I wouldn't have no fear if I were you. Just wait.
You know, a few years ago, I was on a TV program with Social Security. And we were discussing non-payment of benefits. The only benefit that I will get from Social Security is pension benefit as a civil servant. I don't get sickness benefit. So when the question was asked of me, I said to them this: let the day come that I'm entitled to my pension and I don't get it. And you'll see what happens. Now, a lot of things go by in Antigua and Barbuda because we're not a litigious society. We have persons who were made redundant and they come by, they ask for advice, you give them the advice. Sue the company for your severance pay. Just to refer to C-55. That is what gives you the authority to sue. You get a letter from your employer saying that we are closing, you're entitled to this level of severance pay. You will be paid at the end of the month, say the end of September. End of September comes and goes, and you get nothing. But you sit down with your letter in your hand, doing nothing. Two groups of workers, I said to them, get together as a group, visit a lawyer. That will soften the blow in the legal fees if you go as a group than to go as one. And sue the company for your severance pay. The company, when the day came, company told them, oh, when we sell the building is for sale, when we sell it, you get a severance pay. If they had gotten judgment, they could seek to enforce the judgment. And so when they have the building sold by public auction, and they recover their severance pay. But no, they prefer to sit on their hands, say that Labor Department not doing anything for them, when Labor Department can't do anything, because it's not Labor Department that is owed the severance pay. Labor Department can't sue on your behalf. You have to file that suit personally to recover your severance pay. And so I just want to charge those who are here, who are faced with that situation. When you get your termination letter, put it away safely. Get one of those safety boxes at the bank and put it in. And when the day comes and goes and you don't receive your severance pay, retrieve it and take it to the lawyer and sue the company.
We have a lawyer,
so that you can get your severance pay. You have that judgment to hold, you can enforce a judgment. Just an aside, there are persons who say they get judgment at the industrial court, and up to now, I don't get my money. It's not the court fault, it's the individual fault. Because the law tells you how you enforce a judgment of the industrial court. And if you don't afford yourself of that opportunity to enforce the judgment, you're going to be left empty-handed.
Can I ask a question? Okay. So the question, Mr. Pascal, I have seen situations where employers are paying their employees severance annually at Christmas. Is that legal? Is it a severance on the C-55?
No.
It is not, because the law says severance is payable in a redundancy situation, and that is not a redundancy situation. What I've said to persons, it may come to a head at the court, where they may have someone who, for the past 10 years, they may have paid them their severance at the end of every year. That person may be unfairly dismissed, and they go to court, and they may find that they have to pay loss of protection twice, the severance twice, because the court is going to, part of the compensation, loss of protection, equivalent to severance pay. It is not a redundancy situation. You give me money, so I take it, but what are you signing to say? Because you really cannot sign away your rights. If you have a legal right, you can't sign it away like that. And the law says, the labor code says, if you sign anything that is below the standard of the code, that agreement that you sign is null and void. So under the code, you can't sign away your rights.
All right, we have a few more questions as we wind things up. It's getting a bit late, so let's hear the questions.
Sylvester Warner, Aviation. You said you can only get severance when you're made redundant. You say you can only get severance when you get redundant. My question is, and I hear the panel said it, you work for a company, 10, 15 years, you build that company. Suppose I just decide after 10, 15 years, I get enough of this company. Why should I wait for that company now to make me redundant? And I can't get my severance for putting in 10, 15 years. Why is there not something, and this is to Mr. Kentish, why there's nothing in the labor code to that point? Because that's unfair. I'm spending 10, 15 years, 20 years building that company. And I have to either get the boss frustrated to fire me or I don't get no severance. And then if there's anything to make that act really get legislated, that also should be put in there, that while you have unbroken services, 10, 15 years, you shouldn't wait till the company get redundant to get that severance there. Because they have records to show that I have been working there all that time. And I just find that's just, the word I'm not looking for, that's just, you build a company and you have to make your boss get tired of you to get rid of you, just to get that severance.
Let me start by saying, be careful of you saying you let the boss get, what the word you use?
Rid of me.
Tired of you,
me. Yes.
to get rid of you.
Yeah.
Because if that boss is prudent,
Yeah.
he give you the long length of the rope.
Well, I understand.
And at the end of the day, you hang yourself.
I understand.
And you walk away with nothing.
I understand. So that is just a nice way to bring over my point. So everybody gets what I'm saying.
But the thing is this, right? If you want to go, you go. You write your resignation and you walk.
Yes, but I built that company 10, 15 years. Because you, as the young lady says.
Cassandra said you got paid every month. But I read a section of the code, right? C2, paragraph F. You got paid every month, but you earn an equity over and above your wages. Now, what you need is for that equity to be given a value. Currently, that equity has no value. If that equity had a value, you could claim your equity when you leave. Now, I remember reading a judgment out of the UK, and that judgment said, even though you were terminated for a good cause, you should not walk away empty-handed. Why? Because you earned an equity over and above your normal period wages. And so what the court did in that instance, they gave the employee 10% of what would have been his severance pay. But currently, equity has no value, and so you can't claim it.
And that is a little unfair to me, because what the young lady was talking about, even though if you walk away, the only thing sometimes I can see, if the company offers you courses during that time period, take them. Because then if you leave, you can carry that and hopefully get a better paying job somewhere else. And that to me is the only benefit per se you have.
No, but it's an indispensable benefit. It's an indispensable benefit because that knowledge that you have gained through your employer, your employer can't take it back, you know.
Yeah, but Epicure, I'm not going to take that as payment for them. Go
so you use that knowledge and probably moonlight someplace.
Thank you, my brother.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Thank you, Sister Pierre. Sister Pierre.
Vernal Pierre, the Antigua and Barbuda Authority. My question is a funny question. Mr. Kentish, what is a severance?
Just a minute, Sister Pierre. Yes, go ahead.
My question is a funny question. What is a severance and who benefits from a severance?
Severance is that payment which an employee receives when his position is made redundant. Now, you would not want your employer to make it redundant, right? When your position is made redundant, you get severance as compensation for the dismissal that you have faced.
So it's only when you're redundant?
When you're made redundant, correct. Now, if you check, it was inserted in the law that if you're sick for a prolonged period, your employer can terminate you, right? If you check the language of the law, it says you're compensated based on the calculation for severance. it did not say that you get severance pay. It is based on the calculation for severance. So it therefore means that severance pay is only payable in a redundancy situation. No other occasion you receive severance pay. Anything else is compensation you're receiving for something.
Thank you, Mr. Kentish.